This is Metabolic Mastery, a KORR Medical Technologies podcast dedicated to advancing knowledge and practice in metabolic testing. Welcome to Metabolic Mastery, brought to you by KORR Medical Technologies. I'm Dr. Marc Humbert, and this is my co-host, Dr. Cameron Garber. And today we're going to be talking about biomarkers. And this is kind of a buzzwordy topic. That's part of the reason that we decided to talk about it. Because one of the things that we've seen is a lot of language pop up about biomarkers, right? We have these biomarkers, or these are the best biomarkers. And sometimes it's more data, but it's less understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this idea that not all biomarkers are created equal, and that sometimes it's just a fair amount of marketing language that obscures what we're actually seeing. And so we want to kind of take a peek under the hood and talk about what biomarkers are, what ones are useful, like some considerations to think of as you are confronted with this buzzword and seeing this in health and fitness spaces.
Right.
And so the first question really is, what is a biomarker? Because different people will probably tell you different things. At its basis, it is any measurable biological or physiological variable. So that's things like your blood pressure, A1C, your VO2 max, for example. Just throwing that one out there.
Right. Yeah.
But it's I think the thing to understand is it's something that can be measured, and then that alone doesn't tell us the whole story, right? Biomarkers are part of a larger story. And if we don't understand the larger story, if we're not taking time to understand the larger story, we're just getting a mess of biometrics that doesn't really give us anything useful or actionable to do something with. And so what we really want is to have data that's usable and that helps us to give clients the information that will help them make the next right step for their health.
Right. That actually is meaningful and usable and not just buzzwordy, that sounds cool and we can put a neat icon with it, but doesn't always mean anything for how can I change what I'm doing to lead a healthier, more active lifestyle. A lot of those things that we see as biomarkers are often, again, descriptive and not even, I wouldn't even put it in the category of diagnostic. And not very helpful because there's not anything you can do to change those things because it's not a real measured value.
Yeah. Well, it's just, it adds noise to the signal, and it's not giving us, like you mentioned, data that's going to help us make better decisions. And so in that case, it's just pretty. It's just decoration.
Right. Because we have different tiers of what is a biomarker. Like you said, there's measurable values, and then there's calculated values, and then there is extrapolated or kind of sometimes contrived values. So we'll talk more about that, about kind of those different tiers of what a biomarker is and when a more extrapolated value can be valid or at least helpful, and when it's just kind of a stab in the dark.
Yeah. Before we get there, we're going to go with myth number one, and that's that more biomarkers equals better insight. You'll see some people that, this measures 40 biomarkers, and the conclusion is it must be more advanced, right? I should get this. I should get this test. I should go with this because it tells me more things. It actually reminds me. This was I was talking with a physician about this thing that was talking about blood testing, and it was saying, like measure 72 variables or something like that, and he's like, yeah, that's just a complete metabolic panel and a complete blood count. I do this every day.
Every time. Yeah. So if it measures 40 biomarkers, but every other device in the market measures 38 biomarkers, and the last 2 biomarkers you made up, then it's not terribly helpful, those last 2 biomarkers. And every other device does the same thing.
Yeah.
And we see that often, that it's a lot of smoke and mirrors and not necessarily meaningful data.
Absolutely. Well, and it's sometimes taking the same data and just I don't know if you did this. Of course you did this because we all did this. You're writing an essay in school, and then I would do this all the time. I found 5 or 10 different ways to say the same thing, versed in different language, and it gave me the word count, the paper length that I needed,
yeah.
but it didn't actually give me any more actionable information. And I think that's the thing to understand, is that sometimes when there's more biomarkers, it's just the same thing prettied up, said several different ways.
Well,
and not that it can't be useful, but
often it's less accurate.
It's less accurate, yeah.
Because you're trying to make it say something that it's not. You're using that data to bend it to try to say something that it's not actually presenting or revealing.
Yeah. It's like, you have someone step on a scale, you measure their body weight, you tell them their body weight, then you tell them their gravity load, and then you tell them their Earth interaction score, right? Like,
Exactly.
What does that mean? Especially the last one, right? Like, what, your Earth interaction score? Like, I don't even know what that means.
Right.
And so,
well, it's like your body weight versus your body mass versus your body, right? Like, yeah.
It's just one thing, and so splitting into those other things just adds confusion. And what we want the biomarkers to do is to give us the most actionable data and something we can move forward with. And really, I think a good question to ask is, if I removed most of these biomarkers, right, so that there are only a select few, would that still tell the story that I'm trying to tell? Would that give me useful, actionable information to take the next step with this client? And if that's the case, that you could get rid of almost everything and nothing would change, then most of those biomarkers are probably, again, just decoration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So next we'll now dive into this of this myth 2, that every every biomarker has value. And so will you dive in a little bit more to those kind of 3 tiers of biomarkers?
Yeah. So you've got measured biomarkers, things like flow. So the cardio coach, for example, measures a few main things really, really well. It measures air flow, so the amount of flow coming out of your mouth. It measures then the oxygen and carbon dioxide of that. From that, there's a lot of different things that we can then calculate. And then from that, there's a lot of things people extrapolate. And so the things that are extrapolated at that tier often start to get a little bit more off in the weeds. So we have to be really careful as to what's actual meaningful data. At KORR, we always say we're in the measurement game. KORR's drive is to give you really good quality measured values. And then there's a few things that we can calculate that are still accurate when they're calculated based on constants. Things that we have known and proven in science that we have been able to measure in other ways. So the way calories are calculated is based on measured constants that we know of. Mm-hmm. So the respiratory exchange ratio and things like that. So with that, we can take measured values and calculate other things that have known constants. Now, are those outputs from that biomarkers? Yeah, I guess so. Things like your calorie burn and calorie efficiency. Then when we start talking about some of the names we give that stuff, like metabolically flexible or things, and we put a score to that metabolic flexibility versus just saying, hey, there's some signs that you're better at it than and whatever. But when we give it a score, now we're making this extrapolation where it may not always be true because there's different conditions and things like that. So that extrapolated score that we try to make from measured values that, or calculated values even, that becomes a little bit muddier because it may not always be true in every situation. And so you have to be careful there when we start getting 3 and 4 layers deep away from the actual measured value where that biomarker is. And so we see things often that are considered biomarkers within the industry, like lung fitness. To give a score to somebody's lung fitness based on a VO2 max test is not very accurate or even ethical, because it really, there's too many factors to say your lungs are healthy or not healthy based just on that test. Can we get some inferences into maybe some insight of what we're looking at from a standpoint of changes that we can make to improve lung function or lung outputs and things like that, yes. I'm trying very delicately to phrase how I want to say that, because can you see some things that make the lungs that let you know whether or not the lungs are functioning well or not? Yes. But can we put a score to that? That becomes very subjective. And we have to be careful with that. Or heart fitness, certifying whether somebody's heart is fit or not just based on a VO2 max test, especially a VO2 max test where we're not doing EKG and ECG readings. Like, that's really scary to me, because now we're certifying somebody as like, oh, your heart fitness is great, when they could be one step away from, really big heart problems.
Right. Well, and so it's that idea that we can use this data. So again, how am I using this data to take the next right step?
Right.
And if we're identifying, pulmonary limitations, cardiovascular limitations, et cetera, then probably that next right step is, hey, I'm going to refer out to someone who can give a more complete picture of this.
Mhm.
Or if it's within that same office, they can go, but this is like, oh, I want to pull on that string. I'm seeing something here that's giving me a little bit of cause for concern. And so let's look more into that. Not, here's the, end all be all, you're perfectly fit or you're perfectly unfit.
Right.
I think just when we add some of those scores in, it really obscures the actual story.
Right. Oh, things like cellular health. Being able to say, yes, globally your mitochondria are healthy from a VO2 max test just really isn't accurate. Are there some things that give us some hints when things are really bad? Yeah. Are there some things that obviously some things are going pretty well cellularly if somebody's really fit, but to give a score to that and just giving this blanket like pass, you're doing well, doesn't always tell the full story. Because what if that athlete is really frustrated and their cellular health compared to where they have been training for or where they want to be is really poor, but it's higher than the average, and so it's actually great. And so they get this score of like a 8 out of 10, when for them it's a 2 out of 10, right?
Yeah.
For where they have been or can be. So I think you have to be really careful. And then what does cellular fitness even really mean?
Right. Well, and so that is, I think, part of the issue is has this been validated in the literature?
Right.
And you go and look at the literature, like cellular health, this fitness, like
Right.
when we're talking about cardiovascular fitness, you'll see VO2 max.
Right. And those are proven values, proven concepts that have been looked at over time. Whereas like cellular fitness lacks validation. It's conceptual at best.
Yeah.
And really hasn't been well vetted and validated, and is more promotional than it is scientific.
Yeah. Well, and part of the thing too is that, companies will claim that, we have this proprietary algorithm that allows us to do this.
Oh,
that's
like
essentially
biological age.
Biological age. It's a black box.
Right.
And so it gives you the, maybe some of the, it wraps it in the vestments of science without being scientific.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, no, trust us. This algorithm does this. And it's like, well, okay, what does the algorithm look like? What are the inputs that are going into this? And are those validated or not?
And have we followed that for a long enough period of time that we've actually seen that those things lead to those same outcomes?
Yeah.
That the people that you have a biological age of 45 at 65. Have we followed that long enough to see, did they actually live 20 years longer or whatever? That I think we have to be really careful with those types of things.
Well, it's I think part of the problem is it's taking inference and it's passing it off as objective truth,
as science.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things like that. Being able to tell somebody's cognitive health from a VO2 math test without ever having them pass any cognitive skills or tests, wild to me. Posture is another one. And this is one that I had, the cognitive and posture are both ones that I had a conversation with recently, where a customer is like, yeah, I've got this device that's telling me their posture and cognitive health and this and that. And the person did pretty well on the fitness test, but actually has some brain damage and cognitively is functioning very poorly, but can still participate in fitness, and then has terrible posture. I can see it. but they did well on the test, and so it gave them good scores. And it's like they're hunched over and all these things. And so she's like, I just realize how frustrating this is because I'm getting garbage stuff because I can see their poor posture in front of me, and yet it gave them a great posture score. Or I know that this person has some kind of mental capacity problems because of this accident, and they're getting a great mental health score or whatever, the cognitive health score. And so you just have to really be careful, especially when it doesn't pass that kind of sniff test of how could they determine this from the VO2 test? If it's not a very clear thing of like, oh, we can sample oxygen and tell how many calories somebody's burning because there's a constant rate of oxygen consumed from calories burned. Okay, we have a calculatable constant there versus some of these things that are extrapolations and then assigning to a score that extrapolation, assigning a score to that extrapolation. That gets dangerous and muddy.
Absolutely. All right. So next is that biomarkers are objective regardless of conditions. And I think this is just an important point because to be able to measure things accurately over time, there's certain things that we have to standardize.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just standard practice in scientific literature, right? As you look through, like when you're looking through the literature, it's okay, what are the inclusion criteria, right? What are qualifying people to be involved in the study? What are the exclusion criteria? And then what are the things that we're controlling for, right? And how are we randomizing? And then, you have the methods section that describes exactly what people are doing the research so that it's replicatable, right? They can take this research study, someone else can go out and do it and find out the same things. And so there's certain things that if we don't standardize and we don't control that in our testing, then they heavily bias the results. And they act as a confounding variable that it's like, okay, well, here's the output we got, but we don't know if it's actually because of this, right, or if it's one of these other things that should have been controlled for. Right. So a great example of this is, I go to get my blood sugar tested and I, wake up in the morning, eat a huge meal, and then I eat all the way along there. And then I get there and I'm like, oh, you were supposed to do this fasting, but it'll be fine. Just, let's measure anyway. Oh, why is your blood suger so high?
Your blood sugar's crazy. Yeah.
It's because you just ate a meal and it was a protocol violation, right? And so I think understanding, like, if I want to make inferences from this data that are valid, then what are the things that need to be controlled for?
Right.
And what kinds of things introduce too much noise into the data to make it reliable for the conclusions that I'm making.
Right. So that goes back to that episode way long time ago, the test what you intend to measure.
Mm-hmm.
And that concept of, if you want to know what eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich does, then eat one and then do the test. But you have to compare that then to a baseline where you were fasted when beforehand, so that you're comparing what your baseline looks like with as many variables as possible removed. And then you can compare different things to that. But doing a test where you ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich right before, it's hard to make as many inferences from that data because you just did something that we know will affect the measured data that comes out.
Absolutely. And so this goes to this is why we like to have call it lab testing, if you will, mm-hmm. right? That we can standardize some of those conditions, right? What is going to be the workload of, in the protocol versus, oh, I have no idea what the speed that I was running at accurately was, what the grade was, how were different conditions, wind things,
air temperature,
humidity, all that.
Yeah, right.
How is that affecting things?
Right.
For example, like let's look at an RMR test. Did I come in fasted? Did I, do really strenuous exercise the day before? Did I take caffeine or other stimulants right before I took the test? All those things are going to impact the readings. And again, like, we can find out what happens when you're on caffeine or other stimulants, right? We can find out what happens if you ate. But if we want to compare, like, okay, what does it cost for your body to keep the lights on we're going to want to control for some of those other conditions so that we're not introducing things that raise the metabolic rate and give us an artificial understanding of what's actually happening. Mm-hmm. And so I think that this idea that a biomarker is a biomarker and you can measure it anytime, anywhere, under any condition, like if I want to compare it time to time, then I need some level of standardization. Otherwise, it's just kind of stabs in the dark.
Right. And so we have to be careful with whatever that biomarker is supposed to be reading. Was it in optimal conditions for getting a good baseline? Yeah. And so, if I want to see if my blood pressure is high, I probably wouldn't measure that right after I just climbed the stairs coming into the clinic. I know that my blood pressure is going to be higher than at rest if I just climb the stairs into the clinic. Now, would it be interesting to look at the change in blood pressure of getting a true rested blood pressure and then climb the stairs and then see what that changes? Yeah, that's interesting and gives us an idea of how their blood pressure responds to activity and exercise and things like that. So it's not that measure is always bad.
Absolutely.
It's just, is that measuring what you intend to measure? And so test what you intend to measure.
I think just understanding that one lesson can save people from a lot of frustration, right? Because what you mentioned is that it's not necessarily bad to do it that way.
Yeah.
It's just, what are you trying to see? What's the problem set that you're trying to solve for, and doing that.
What are we trying to learn?
Yeah.
If they have weird, fainting episodes and problems with their blood pressure because now they're on a blood pressure medication because they have high blood pressure and they're passing out. Okay, let's see what conditions their blood pressure drops while they're on this medication, and can we do things to mitigate that? Can they drink more fluids? Can they have more salt? Can they, whatever it is, can we help mitigate those symptoms while keeping their blood pressure at a healthy range? Yeah. So it's starting with great baselines though, and real measured biomarkers. That's the key.
Yeah.
And not extrapolated kind of whimsical biomarkers.
Nice way to say that. All right. Next myth is that having biomarkers automatically leads to better decisions.
Yeah, it can.
And so one of the things that we've stressed on the podcast is having better data can being the operative word, help us to make better decisions. And so if it's, measured data that has high accuracy, or if it's calculated data that's got those reliable constants, then we can help use that to make better decisions. But even when we have that measured data, it's what's the larger story that this is fitting into. And so, for example, right, we can measure VO2, VCO2. We can get their respiratory exchange ratio, and we can have an idea of their fat oxidation rates. But that doesn't necessarily tell them how to lose fat, right? It's, okay, now that we understand this, and we've looked at some of these other biomarkers, and we understand your health history, we understand your challenges, we understand what you've tried before, we understand what doesn't work, and maybe some of what has worked in the past. Now we can bring that all together and say, well, hey, this is the best plan for you, right? This is the next right step. And person to person, that's going to look different, right? For one person, that's looking to lose weight, the intervention might look this way, right?
Yeah.
We're going to try these things. But for someone who's really struggled with this, or has some, unhealthy relationships to food or to food rules, those interventions might look a little bit different, or it might be,
Right.
We're going to go towards more of like a cognitive behavioral counseling before we hit some of these other areas.
So, this myth is biomarkers automatically lead to better decisions. I would say false, but it leads to better questions.
I like that.
Right? So by getting good quality biomarkers, then we can ask better questions of our patients, and we can dive into, okay, how does this biomarker then apply to their life and lifestyle? And from that, we can ask questions to figure out, okay, what's the best way to then apply this information to their life and lifestyle to make the right adjustments. And then there's a reason why we call it medical practice, or, healthcare practice, is we will try that experiment and see if it works. And there's a lot of factors into what works and doesn't work. It may just be their consistency with doing it. And so we need to modify to maybe make it a smaller change that they can be more consistent with or whatever. And so there's a give and take of how to apply the solution. But the biomarkers help you ask better questions so you can get to the right solutions. They don't automatically necessarily give you all of the answers, and that'd be nice.
I think that is such a valuable insight, right? If you get nothing else from that episode, is using that to ask better questions. I truly, in so many domains, I truly believe that the quality of our questions helps to determine the quality of our lives,
right?
And the quality of our decisions, certainly, right? Well, we were talking about this on another episode of that client that you're working with that was able to go from not being able to jump at all to be able to doing a broad jump, which for this particular client was such a huge improvement, but it changed the type of questions that she was asking, right?
Yeah, like, absolutely.
How do I avoid falls to how can I now do this activity with my sister that we love doing? And so it's I just love this idea of we're getting good data, and then what's the next right question to ask, and then it's just so much more.
There's a whole cascade of that, right? So she came in with some hip and back pain issues, and so we did some testing to get real data, and we found that she had a lot of weakness, and so that led to more questions, which led to more data. So found out that she was having falls. And so falls, again, is a measurable thing. It's not always the best reporting. But
that didn't really count as a fall, did it?
Yeah. But so we saw that she had falls. So we did some additional testing and found out that her power, not just her strength, but her ability to generate power was really low. And so we found that not only did she have a falls problem, but it probably wasn't a balance problem. It was a power generation problem. And so from there, we were able to do better questions to find out what we needed to start working on. And then we were able to get the right intervention of building her power. And all of a sudden, the hip pain, back pain, all of those things, as we got her stronger and able to move more quickly, all of the pain issues went away because we were able to fix the root cause of these things because we got good data. And then we're able to ask the right questions, which built toward the right solutions. And so same idea, once we started working on her cardiovascular fitness and other things, we're able to collect good data with her VO2 max test to see what's the right way to start applying cardiovascular exercise to her body. But we were able to also ask the right questions of how much are you doing right now? What are you comfortable with? And so we're able to not only prescribe the right game plan in terms of volume and intensity, but what's going to actually work with her life and lifestyle so that she was able to participate in it and stick with it enough to see results.
Absolutely. Well, just how do we translate all this into what people can consistently apply?
Right. And that's the art of the science of it. The science is getting really good, meaningful data. The art is asking the right questions and then using that combined information to apply that.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for diving a little bit deeper. I just think that's such an important thing. And again, if there's one thing that we can understand, it's how can we use this to ask better questions?
Right. Well, the application to actual real people, because we love to geek out about the science of it, but it's that application to real people, real situations that really is meaningful.
Yeah, real results. Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about this one. So if it can be measured, it can predict your future.
Uh-huh.
And so this is a tricky one. So there are certain things that do a good job at giving us an idea of our future risks. So again, VO2 max is a great indicator for mortality risk. Low fitness, people with low fitness have a much higher risk of mortality than people with high fitness. BMI is another one. We've talked about this on a previous episode. When is it useful? Not as a measure of fitness or fatness, but does a really good idea at stratifying risk. And so it's that J-shaped curve. And so people that are very underweight have a higher risk of mortality, and those that have a much higher BMI have an increased risk of mortality, with kind of 21 to 25 being that sweet spot. But those things, while they don't predict our future,
right,
per se, they still give us a good idea of our trajectory. And if I want to change my trajectory, then there's some things that I need to do. The problem is that there's certain biomarkers that are like that say, oh, you're going to heal this quickly. Oh, you're going to perform this way. And the problem is that there are just so many inputs that to make this sweeping conclusion about the future just is not a valid conclusion to make.
Right.
Human bodies are complex systems. It's there's so many different inputs that are going in, and as those inputs, work with each other, they can drastically change, behavior. They can change health outcomes. And so sometimes we look at this biomarker. It's like, oh yeah, like I trying to tread lightly here. But I took a look at this thing and now I know that I'm this type of person, or I'm this way, or I need to do this type of training. And it's this. So we were having this conversation earlier, right? About genetic predispositions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I might have a genetic predisposition for something. I might also never develop that. And so, for example, there's people with that have an increased risk for breast cancer. Some of them will get that, some of them won't.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this idea that in this particular example, genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just because we may have a predisposition for something doesn't necessarily mean that that's a one-to-one outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I have this thing, this will be my future, right? Oh, I have this genetic predisposition, then I will, be a high performance athlete, or I need to treat injuries this way, or whatever it is.
Right.
And there's just so many things that dump into that. Just because, again, this goes back to the conversation of not all biomarkers have value or are useful. And some biomarkers have a good base of evidence behind them. Again, like measuring blood sugar, A1C, blood pressure, VO2 max, which we mentioned. We've got a good research base beneath them that helps us to use them to make useful decisions. A lot of the stuff is hype, is marketing language, or is very preliminary data that doesn't allow us to draw strong conclusions.
Right.
And I think that's an area that we need to be careful is, again, there can be a lot of excitement around biomarkers, some buzzy things. It's going to do this.
Right.
And
it's really increasing because of wearables. Wearable tech, whether it's a watch or a ring or a VO2 mask that's wearable, a lot of those give us some data, but a lot of the results are more extrapolations and stuff like that with the dashboards and the information that they're giving you from it. So be careful to make sure you're boiling it down into what is the actual measured value versus what is it that they are calculating or extrapolating from that measured value. So the measured values can be really helpful, whereas the kind of extrapolations, you have to take that with a grain of salt. So like your sleep scores or things like that, if you feel well rested, even if your sleep score is bad, and you look at it and you see that you had good, rhythms and stuff in your sleep, that you may be fine.
Yeah.
And one day versus consistency and all there's lots of factors that go into it. But just be careful what you're leaning into in terms of the data that you're using to make health decisions.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to that idea of like more biomarkers doesn't necessarily lead to better decisions. What happens sometimes, again, what you mentioned with wearables, is now we have so much data that it can cause decision paralysis. It can cause unhealthy, habits of thinking or behavioral habits around those things, right? Oh my gosh, like I got a bad sleep score. Like, okay, what do I need to change in my sleep environment? And I got to do this, right? And we get so much anxiety over these metrics that they actually make us less mentally healthy and less physically healthy, right? Because we're making all of our decisions just based on the data. And so it's like, okay, well, like we've got to have a decision matrix for that. So given this data, I love what you mentioned, right? Okay, it's like, well, like I feel good. I'm performing well, right? I went out and I did a run and I was able to, run at a faster pace at the same heart rate that I would usually run on a solo basis. So that gives me a good idea, right? This is a signal that's coming from my body that's telling me like, oh, I actually am well rested and recovered, right? Enough to do this. And so just like, if you find yourself checking your biomarkers every 5 minutes, then that's probably a signal that you've maybe leaned a little bit too far into that, and just pull back and say, okay, like, am I getting regular movement in throughout my day, right? Am I doing strength training, some form of strength training? Am I doing some sort of cardiovascular activity, right? Even if my sleep's not perfect, like, do I tend to get quality sleep? Are there some things that are maybe increasing my stress level right now, right? Do I have a test coming up, a big presentation at work, something happening with one of my kids, right? Are there some of these other areas that I can look at and address, instead of just, poring over the biomarkers and whoa, what's the tiny tweak that I need to make to make everything work?
Right.
Like,
well, focus on the lifestyles.
Yeah.
Focus on the big picture things and what can I do to lead that healthy, active lifestyle. And that's kind of the idea is when we do that, the biomarkers should fall into place. And those one or two things that may be out of whack, we can take a closer look into what can I do to tweak that. But if we stress out too much about any one of them, we'll often find that they all start going haywire.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where take that information and use it to help inform decisions and make earlier decisions to right the ship earlier and things that can be helpful. But it's more about it helping you ask the right questions so that you can make the right adjustments. And so asking those questions of, does this line up with what I'm seeing? That's a big one.
Yeah.
Right? Does this line up with what I'm seeing, thinking, feeling? If not, why? And from there we can usually learn a lot about whether or not it's a good biomarker.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many times that you've, seen a test and you're like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's, oh, yep, that made sense.
Yeah.
That's why I'm getting that data.
That's my favorite thing to do is look at a test and then start asking questions.
Yeah.
To see what made their situation line up with what we're seeing on the test.
Absolutely. So I think, bring this together into a useful framework, right? We want to be able to ask questions. And I think starting with like, what's the question I'm asking about the data? Instead of asking how many biomarkers does this device measure, ask, is it giving me information that's going to help this client make better decisions for their health? And so first, what's being measured versus what's being calculated versus what's being extrapolated or just frankly made up.
Yep. At times we see that, unfortunately.
And then as I'm, using this device, whatever it is, right? Whether it's the cardio coach or certain wearables, like, is the metric standardized? Is it repeatable over time? So especially for VO2 testing, this matters, right? Have I followed pre-test protocol, including any fasting restrictions if necessary? And then during the testing, right, have I standardized the speed and the grade, the workload, what I'm doing, how I'm instructing the patient, so that, again, the test is standardized and repeatable so that I can compare test to test.
Yeah.
And then this goes back to how am I applying it to the individual person is, does what I'm measuring reduce uncertainty about their training, right? Oh, now that I have this data, I have a good idea of how to set up their training so they're going to be successful. If it's not helping you make that decision, then it's probably just fluff. Is it reducing uncertainty about nutrition? Oh, yeah, you know what? I think you're not eating enough calories, so your body's kind of gone into alarm mode. And so let's actually up your calories and change some of these other things to help you, more sustainably get to a healthy weight. Is it reducing uncertainty about health risks? Right? Hey, we saw that your VO2 max score is here. When we look at this population data, it shows that people in this lowest fitness category are at much higher risk than people in this fitness category. And so here's the things that we're going to do to help to mitigate that risk and to move you to the next fitness level. Like, moving from the lowest fitness level, just the next one up, substantially reduces risk. And so, like, it doesn't always have to be this like big crazy thing. It's just these small sustainable steps. And then this information, can I act on it consistently? Again, this is the nice thing for the cardio coach, right? We measure all these variables, and then we're able to use that data to set heart rate training zones that people can act on consistently, right? This is where we want you exercising. This is where we want you to spend the most time. And so, do this, and then we'll check in and say, hey, did it work? Versus like, again, some things are kind of sound cool or flashy, but like, what is that actually leading me to do, right?
Right.
Okay, so my cellular fitness is like, okay.
What do I do to
What do I
improve
do?
my cellular fitness or my cognitive fitness?
Whatever. Whatever the thing is. And so, so what is it measuring? Is for VO2 testing and RMR testing, is the protocol standardized and repeatable? And does this reduce uncertainty about what my next decision would be, right? About training, about nutrition, about health risk, things like that.
Yeah.
And then can I act on this consistently? And then going back to that thing of, if I just removed most of those biomarkers and looked at a core few, would anything in my decision set change? If not, then like I can probably just ignore those other ones and really focus on the biomarkers that are gonna, carry the most freight of their health.
Yeah.
And so I think bottom line is, the goal is, biomarkers are nice, right? Don't get me wrong. It's great to test these things, but the goal isn't more biomarkers. It's valid and useful biomarkers that I can use to make better decisions and ask better questions, so that instead of guessing about what the next step should be, I have actionable data that I can say, hey, based on this data, this is, again, the next right decision for your health. This is going to help you move forward. And so if it's not allowing us to make better decisions or ask better questions, then again, it's probably just dressing, it's decoration, it's fluff. And we can just ignore it and actually focus on the things that matter for improving health.
Right. Because the goal isn't more data or more biomarkers that don't really make sense or that are just guesses. The goal is fewer guesses, better questions, so that you get the right answers in the long run.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us. As always, if you want more content like this, remember to like, follow, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Ready to take your metabolic testing to the next level? Visit KORR.com to learn more about purchasing our metabolic test equipment.